Hey everyone, final show of the month of August. Welcome to another edition of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
We have Dan Buttafuoco here for a fun show as we will be talking to him about the NASCAR Heat Pro League and the upcoming NASCAR playoffs that begin next week. Before we get to that though, Tim, it's time for our weekly SEC recap where we break it down with a surprise, an expectation, and a conclusion from the weekend of sports. I'm going to start with my surprise, and it's that the Jazz and Nuggets are going to a seventh game in the first round of the NBA playoffs. I thought Denver was going to come out with the upper hand, and then when Utah was up 3-1, I thought they were going to finish them off, but Jamal Murray has proven resilient. My expectation, the Mets would fall apart in some way against the Yankees, and boy, did they. They won those first two games on Friday and then three terrible losses, and just now as we're recording, I'm watching them probably lose again because of a bad error by Pete Alonso that screwed over DeGrom, so not surprised. Hopefully Steve Cohen buys the team and makes things better. And my conclusion, of course, we'll talk a lot of NASCAR in a bit, but my conclusion is that the Hendrick cars are going to be competitive in the playoffs because William Byron is starting to get some momentum rolling. He showed a lot of experience and just really a lot of poise at the end of the race at Daytona, in addition to the doubleheader at Dover. Alex Bowman, I know he hasn't been as strong as the beginning of the year, but I have faith in him. And, Chase Elliott, he's one of the best drivers right now in the Cup Series.
Yeah, it's going to be funny because in terms of my SEC, my S is actually going the slightly opposite direction of you. But in regards to the same exact series of the Utah Jazz and the Denver Nuggets, and my surprise really is Jamal Murray being a superstar. I mean, this is incredible. I knew Donovan Mitchell was great in the playoffs. We mentioned this, in fact, on the past podcast, or I should say on the last Sports Speak. And, we expect this from Donovan to come out and be that guy that leads the Jazz on the floor every single day. But Jamal Murray has been an underrated player for this Denver Nuggets team time and time again. And he turns out and he's having the series of his life. 50 points yesterday. If I'm not mistaken, was that his second or was that his first 50 game? I think it was second, right?
Of the series.
Second. So, yeah, both him and Donovan with two 50-point games. They're both averaging nearly 40 points a game. And this series almost feels like a Western Conference Finals series, even though it's just, the quarterfinals. And the way this started out, the Jazz, they were dominating. I knew they blew game one, but they were up 20 points every single game. Then the Denver Nuggets have turned around and have played good defense on everyone except for Donovan Mitchell and have turned around and found a way to beat the Utah Jazz while making their offensive possessions effective. I can't wait to see that game tomorrow, but Jamal Murray has been a surprise, and I guess I could say this isn't my expectation, but I wouldn't be surprised tomorrow if he turns around and puts on another show alongside Donovan Mitchell. My expectations also, I guess you could say somewhat of a copycat in your regard. The New York Mets, it doesn't surprise me. You can literally type a book, 1,000 Ways to Lose, by the New York Mets, and they will find a way to lose. A wild pitch on an attempted safety squeeze, might I mind you, was probably one of the most interesting ways I've seen the Mets lose of late. But of course, you saw it in the group chat. I predicted Edwin Diaz, maybe not on the second pitch, but allowing a home run to ultimately blow that lead that the Mets had yesterday. So overall, if you're a Mets fan, and I'm sorry, as a Yankees fan, I was personally suffering with 7 consecutive losses. But to overall take the Subway Series, I'll take it as a Yankees fan. But the Mets, that's not surprising at all. And in conclusion, you also somewhat mentioned NASCAR, but for me, I'm saying motorsports overall. Dan and I actually the other day talked about it a bunch on the Three Takes podcast about how exciting it is overall to be a fan of motorsports. And I'll tell you what, the future is bright between F1, IndyCar, NASCAR in particular. It is going to get interesting, to say the least, and I'm excited to watch a bunch of racing over the next 2 months.
Yeah, all three series, some people like one style over another, but all of them, similar path. You see some young guns that are really rising to the occasion, some of the old guards starting to phase out, and it's creating some exciting racing. And in a time when still there's a lot of uncertainty around sports, high contact sports especially, racing has kind of provided that fix, and all three series are thriving right now. But we have Dan right here. I'm going to address it first. First of all, I love all the Geico stuff. Very promotional in the background. I love the Gecko bobblehead as well.
Yeah, thank you. Always got to represent.
Yeah, of course. So we got to start with the Heat Pro League. I mean, you won the championship. It was a tough fight, but, just take us through overall that night. I mean, it was tough. It was a tough season, and you got it done.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it. And, yeah, that was awesome. I mean, that was a really intense finale. Having those final three races, having all three races be very different. But, yeah, it was very great. I mean, I'll start off with Michigan. That race, wasn't too worried about it, to be honest. I felt that we had a good car in the draft. If we could stay in the draft, stay in the low lane with a big pack, that it wasn't going to be a really big issue for us because we had a really strong Geico Chevy Camaro. But then I was trying to get used to things, and then I thought I braked enough for the pit road entry, but I was just about a few tenths of a mile an hour faster into pits, and that got me a speeding penalty. And I literally couldn't believe it. So it was also the first time in practice we had green flag pit stops. So I was a little worried then, because typically we go green for a long time, and then guys are getting ready for another green flag pit stop. And then right on the lap I was going to pit, I saw two cars flipping over like a tornado. It was pretty crazy. And then I had to get through the middle of those, and then caution came out finally, and that kind of saved us and rebounded to fourth, and we really got lucky that race. And then that kind of just helped me build momentum into Phoenix. Got third there. I was taking it cautious. I mean, I knew we had like a top two car. I didn't want to overset the boundaries. We led a little bit, but overall, I mean, guys are very hungry. Like Gritton and Brooks are hungry for the win, so I kind of let them have at it because realistically, I just want to have a shot at the finale. So that was good. And then Bristol, we had a pretty good car. I got into a few incidents with Gritton and Harbin at the final restart. I got a little bit of damage from them, and I think they helped me rotate the car a bit better. But we were faster than Brooks there that final run. We were much faster. We were chipping a lot of time away, about half a tenth, maybe a tenth faster than him. He even set the fastest lap of the race. And then I was trying to work high, trying to sneak up there, kind of put my nose on the outside. And then I tried back up the corners, trying to do a little undercut. That really wasn't working. The low line wasn't an option at all because Bristol low lane wasn't really working around that track. So then at 5 to go, I'm like, I'm going to have to move him. It's something I don't normally do. I'm not that kind of guy, but it's one chance at a championship, and I had to give it a shot. And then three to go, we moved him up the track, and he kept door banging me on the straightaway. And then we kind of had contact again, and he hit the wall without any intention there. He was door banging me so much that he bounced off my car, I think, and hit the wall, and it stopped him. And then we were able to get through, and we pulled away, and we took home a very emotional victory. It was a very, very difficult season. Maybe the stats don't tell the truth, but I worked very hard to get to this position, and it's just an honor to be a part of the Geico and Germain Racing team, and to have all the support from everybody from there, and be, I guess, an ambassador of the Pro League is pretty cool, and just a really great season. It's been a massive, massive climb. I mean, I really was in the last season, but then I really worked hard over the offseason to get better, understand the tracks, understand the setups and everything, and it was just a really big climb, and just overall really, really happy. And last season I had 4 top 5s and 13 top 10s, and this season we had 4 wins and 13 top 5s and 16 top 7s. So it's a really big change, and hopefully next season will lead to bigger and better things.
Now, I do have to ask you this in this regard, because obviously when we first met, especially during the preseason tryouts, you mentioned Bristol to be the track that you just couldn't figure out in terms of the short tracks. In fact, these 3 races that you went to of Michigan, which you and I both know you struggled with in regards to the draft effect and trying to understand it, as well as Phoenix, which you actually were racing on East Park 2 weeks prior, and you openly said you just couldn't figure out the track. When you look back at the picture now, does it feel a little bit more relieving knowing that these were arguably your 3 toughest tracks to face, and yet you tamed them all and still came home the champion?
Yeah, I do remember saying that too. People like make fun of me for that because I say I just a lot of tracks that don't suit my style. Yeah, about the Bristol one. So like on Heat 3 and even Heat 4 to start, like I just couldn't figure it out. I always made my cars tight. I think I made them too tight to the point where I really couldn't drive them, where I was just burning the right front, burning everything. I just couldn't get off the corner. I'd always have good results, but I just never had the speed. And I feel like I've had the speed. I feel like I'd be pretty strong there. And we were all working that time trial week for Xfinity, and then we hit on something. I think me and Snack were working on it, and we hit on it. And my first attempt, we got the fastest time on Xbox. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So then I set that time, improved here or there. Then another guy beat my time barely. And I'm like, all right, let me see if I can beat it. And we ended up beating it. And then that was it. And we won the time trial that week. And that got my confidence up really big because that's always been the weakest track for me on pace. And we beat Track Bar, we beat Rocket, we beat Rose, a whole bunch of other great competitors around Bristol in the Xfinity cars that time trial week. So then I kind of used that momentum, took what I learned from that time trial event and kind of kept applying it to other disciplines and just kept going. Michigan, yeah. I mean, I'm not much of a draft guy. I don't like drafting these kind of tracks. I mean, super speedway is something else, but here it's just not my thing. And I knew we had a really good car, but once again, it was about track position, and we kind of got lucky there at the end. But hey, I mean, we had a really good car to show for it, so I'm happy with it. And yeah, I remember saying that about Phoenix too. I mean, I always had a hard time with the tire wear there because the right rear, as anybody knows, burns up incredibly fast. So I was worried about it. And I was worried about it in East Park, but we pretty convincingly won that race. So, I mean, we had a really good car there. And I even made more adjustments to that car from then on. Yeah, it definitely felt great, especially when you're racing against the best and you're running about the top 3 every race, even the tracks that you know you're weak at and you're struggling at on custom setups to the top level. It's really encouraging. And I think, Michigan, especially Phoenix, track that I really never thought I'd be as strong out in this game with how the tires are and how I couldn't really get the grips in the car setup. We were running second convincingly, and I felt at some points were faster than Brooks. And that was just really great. And then even at Bristol, when we were faster than him there at the end and got the win. I mean, last season when I was racing at Bristol, it was a terrible race for my part. Couldn't figure it out. So it's just been really great. So it definitely feels good. I mean, just to make those improvements and just keep learning stuff and hope to keep learning as the time goes on and as we get closer and closer to season 3.
Yeah, it's certainly impressive the growth you made from season 1 to season 2 and then coming out as a champion. Definitely a lot to build on going into next season. So let's move on to the actual NASCAR series. We had Daytona on Saturday night. There was no rain, no crazy winners because of rain. So we actually got to see a good, hard 160-lap race. And Tim, I just want to say, to me, I think this Daytona race and Talladega a few weeks ago was some of the best plate racing I've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I was real anxious coming into this race, to say the least, because, when you have it as a cutoff race, and I apologize for the phone going off in the background, but you don't know what to expect. The anxiety's there, and it's the fact of the matter that you have to expect the unexpected. But if I'm being honest, and I know the last podcast we mentioned, I thought Jimmy Johnson wrecks out in the first stage. I thought we were going to see the race decided of who makes the playoffs and who doesn't very early on. But yet we didn't see that. We saw close competitive racing. Guys were, not afraid to make a move up towards the front. And interestingly enough, in stage 2 in particular, we saw strategy as well mixed into it as well. Some guys trying to, mix in the fuel strategy. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly what we saw at the Clash earlier in the season, and we saw the guys that pitted ultimately end up prevailing, and we saw that again in this scenario with Joey Logano. But the race overall, I mean, it was intense. Yes, at times we saw cars, fade out in a single file for a good little bit on the top side, but once they got side by side, they were going right at it. And it was an incredible finish. I'll tell you what, big for William Byron picking up the win. He definitely wasn't my pick to win, but overall, huge for Hendrick, building some momentum overall for all four cars in that stable going into the playoffs.
Yes, certainly. And like you said, I didn't really know what to expect, specifically with Talladega. We talked about this a long time ago, but after they changed the package a little bit after Newman's crash, I didn't know what to expect with the plate racing. But honestly, I think lowering the horsepower even more has actually helped. And we saw it at Talladega, a great finish. We've also seen, I know we saw a couple big crashes in this one, but at Talladega we didn't see that much wrecking. But we got to see a lot of close, hard racing where the cars being a little on edge, but not enough where everybody was crashing. We did, like I said, we did see two big wrecks, but it wasn't anything too crazy. Dan, what about your impressions from the race?
I was pretty surprised, to be honest. I kind of was expecting not 2016, but like last season's fall Talladega race, to be honest. I mean, how much was on the line, I was kind of expecting that. But overall, it was really good. I saw a stat that said it was the first time since 1999 that the first 100 laps of this very race went caution-free or wreck-free. So I was really impressed by that. I think just guys were playing it very smart. Like even Ricky Stenhouse, I remember. Like, he's usually trying to get up to the front, but, you were watching the whole race, you're hearing from reporters that he was taking it cautious, with around 30 to go, he was making his moves. Even seeing my man Ty Dillon up there in the front, got the lead momentarily, running second for the majority of stage 2. And I was kind of hoping he saved enough. I was kind of hoping that he saved enough and saved in stage 2 to get some good stage points and get some track position, but that strategy didn't quite work out, unfortunately, because guys like Jimmy Johnson really made that strategy work, and Joey Logano and those guys. So that was kind of unfortunate there. But overall, it was a really good race. I think we got to see some great racing towards the front, especially stage 3. There was a lot of good stuff to see. And then once Anthony Davidson had his little spin, cautions, precautions, and got pretty crazy. We saw some really great moves and some incredible wreck avoidances too. I saw. Ty Dillon got through quite a few wrecks. I think especially the first big one, he did a really good job getting through there. Byron, the same wreck, did a really good big one wreck avoidance. I think that's often kind of underrated. And even Alex Bowman in the second big one wreck. There was a lot of really good maneuvers made by some of those drivers in very quest scenarios. So it was definitely a great race to watch. I was excited watching it. I tend to get pretty excited watching those races as a fan. It hurts sometimes, especially when Ty wrecked final lap. I was pretty hurt seeing that car on fire. I was like, oh, man. But overall, it was a really great race, though. I'm pretty sure that they're going to continue doing this. I'm obviously more of a tradition guy. I like July 4th racing under the lights. That's my thing. I've always loved that, sort of firecracker 400 feeling on 4th of July. I'm going to miss that. But I think this was very successful, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to continue this moving forward.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I agree with you what you said. I like it on 4th of July weekend, too, because of the tradition, and you think about it. But at the same time, just this situation where you had 20 drivers where if they won, they could get into the playoffs, and, it really produced some great racing. Tim, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to ask too is that, we looked there coming towards the end of the race. Obviously, we saw a couple of big wrecks and such, but that last lap in particular was exciting because honestly, I've never seen a plate race that's had that many runs going on in a matter of 4 corners. I mean, Alex Bowman, for example, he dropped all the way back to, I believe it was 10th or 12th by the end of turn 2, trying to get out of the way. And suddenly he was pushing right back up towards the top 5. And had he not had his run blocked momentarily, he may have been competing for that win coming off of turn 4 and when it was all said and done. But it almost felt like you couldn't predict who was going to win that race heading to the final lap, which obviously we know that's the aspect of Daytona and Talladega. But usually there's a more formed line We didn't see that in this race. We saw almost kind of like two-car tandems to an extent in which everyone was going at it because everyone wanted to make it. I mean, even Brendan Gaughan almost won the race when it was all said and done. And how big would that be for him in his final career race, might I add?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, like, I was really thinking that because Brendan Gaughan was like third at one point, and I didn't even realize it when I was watching because I was so tied into watching Byron and Truex, and I saw him there, and I'm like, wow, no way. I mean, he's usually good at survival and pretty good at being there at the end of these races, especially in the actual Daytona 500 this year. I believe he got a top 10 run there, and he got another top 10. He got 8th, but he was running top 5, and then all of a sudden he fell to 8th. So, yeah, the draft is very I mean, I shouldn't be surprised I'm saying it, but overpowered, but also just a lot can happen in like 3 seconds. So it was definitely fun to watch for sure. A lot could have happened. I think I was watching Bell and with 2 to go, and he was running second. I thought he had a good shot at the win, and then he got involved in an incident with Boyer, I believe, and that kind of ended his chase there. So it just shows how much can happen in just a short amount of time, these tracks, and it's probably why a lot of these drivers don't like these tracks as much, but it definitely makes for some good entertainment for the fans.
And you mentioned Christopher Bell. The rookies have been really impressive at the plate tracks. You think about Tyler Reddick back at Talladega, had a little bit of a questionable move that caused the big one that we'll get to in a couple minutes. But just overall, between Bell, Custer, and Reddick, other than Reddick, the other two had a really slow start to the season, but they're starting to put together solid runs consistently. This rookie class is living up to the hype that we expected. Custer's the one in the playoffs. He's probably the one people thought had the least chance of the 3 to make the postseason, but he's there. But, the rookies were strong. But I mentioned Tyler Reddick. Let's talk about the 2 big wrecks because we stayed clean till 8 to go when Tyler Reddick put on quite the block on Kyle Busch, put him up into the wall, and basically everybody behind Eric Jones piled into him. I mean, and we heard both Kyle Busch and Ryan Newman not too happy with the driver of the 8, Dan. What did you make of that incident?
Yeah, so I mean, I like I obviously like Ty Dillon, but I have my other favorites like Chase and Kyle is one of them, and pretty happy to see Kyle in the front. And then Reddick was making a move, and I'm like, yeah, he's not going to be clear. And then I saw dust flying from the wall, and I'm like, oh no. And then there was the big wreck, and I saw Jones at the wall and a whole bunch of guys. And at that point, I was hoping Ty was going to make it through. I didn't know where he was at the point, but then he made it through, so that was good. But just seeing a lot of wrecked cars there, looked pretty bad. Ryan Preece hit the wall very hard. That's the second time in however many weeks he's had 2 hard hits. So I'm fortunate he's okay because that was pretty bad. But yeah, it was misjudgment. I mean, we all make misjudgments. I've made my misjudgments here or there. I mean, it's just a simple racing mistake that he made there. It happens. I mean, it's a part of racing. He tried an aggressive block, didn't quite work out. I've made those mistakes too with the blocks. On heat, I try to make a move and I'm not quite fast enough, and then I'm in the wall and the other guy's in the wall, and you don't mean for that to happen, but that's just unfortunately one of those things there, and took out a lot of good cars. But I was just one of those unfortunate racing deals at super speedways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I look at is Reddick's in a situation there with the laps counting down where, again, you have to remember he was in a must-win situation. He knew that. Now the reality is he wasn't clear. He's going to learn from that. But you can't fault him in the same regard, too, that he had to make an aggressive move to get up and block that lane simply because of the fact that it's win or go home. Reality is if he doesn't go up and block Kyle Busch, he gets shuffled out of line, and he falls all the way to the back again with not that much time left in the race. So overall, I know why Newman's upset, as well as Kyle Busch, as well as many other drivers. But again, the reality hits him that you're going to do anything you can to win. And Reddick, he made a mistake. It's tough. But overall, again, he has to live to learn. He's still young. And there's a long way to go in his career. I don't think this is going to be the exact pinpoint, I guess you could say, on his season of why he didn't make the playoffs. But overall, again, you live to learn through your mistakes. And I think it'll all turn out fine for Tyler Reddick. But in the back aspect of the fields, he got a little bit interesting, Eddie, in that incident, in my opinion, because a lot of the drivers, with the exception of Denny Hamlin, really, that we thought had the capability or chances of winning this race coming to the end, all got wiped out in that one incident.
Mhm.
And it really, I would say, changed the complexion of that race in a matter of one corner.
Yeah, Austin Dillon, Ricky Stenhouse, probably two of the more aggressive plate racers that you'd expect to find success at Daytona were in that, as well as Eric Jones. Ryan Preece, one of my favorites. He always wrecks. That's just what happens. And the 37 ends up getting demolished almost every week. McDowell, he's a great plate racer too. There were a lot of guys that were in that like win or go home situation that got taken out there. But I want to shift it over to the second wreck. Tim, like we talked about, stage one was when he thought Jimmy Johnson would get in a wreck. He actually lasted till lap 159, and he barely got clipped there. It's hard to really put any sort of blame on that incident. Logano had a run to the lead. Bubba Wallace made it 3 wide. You knew he was going to go for it if he was in that situation. And then Byron went 4 wide. I don't know how Byron and Hamlin did not wreck there, but Logano ultimately was the one to lose control. And that was a hard crash with a few cars. And then I think it was Kenseth that just barely clipped Jimmy Johnson, ended his day. Johnson was still running out there with like no front fender and his tires all sticking out. And he was able to cross the line actually and finish the race, but obviously did not make the playoffs.
I was going to say, to my understanding, though, Logano actually, and I know Logano tends to make excuses from time to time, but if you go back and watch the replay, his analysis of it does make sense. Going down the straightaway, I believe it was Bubba, barely scraped his right rear just a little bit while they were side drafting, and it seemed like he cut down a tire going into that corner, which is why he got wicked loose setting up that accident. But overall, I mean, I guess my prediction did stay accurate. Remember I said the way Jimmy Johnson goes, it's either he wrecks in the first stage with a Chip Ganassi car or overall goes on to have a good day. Well, okay, he didn't make it. He didn't wreck in the first stage. But guess what the car was that hit him first?
Yes.
It was Matt Kenseth in a Chip Ganassi car, ultimately ending Johnson's season in regards to running for the championship. But, it's a tough break for Jimmy. He'll live to learn through this. And you have to remember, for Jimmy, he's had one heck of a career. This isn't going to define the kind of driver Jimmy Johnson is. And, who knows? You have to remember Jimmy Johnson as well is 44 years old. Think about that. He could turn around and do other things with his career afterwards if he really wants to. I mean, Kevin Harvick, who's having the year of his life right now, is 44 years old. So there's a lot to think about in that regards. But, for Jimmy, it's tough, but it's not the end of the world for him. He has a bigger picture to look at, 10 more races to try to at least win one. And there's some good tracks in his chase for him. But overall, that wreck was pretty tough for a bunch of guys. But yet again, like I said, with that first wreck, it set up for the interesting ending, especially considering the fact you didn't know who had damage and who didn't. Because you have to remember, too, William Byron.
Okay, I'm good. Yeah, my internet went out for a second, but
Oh, okay. I just thought that was me.
yeah, no,
Oh,
we're okay. Technical issues, you know how it is. But continuing just with what we were talking about there, Jimmy Johnson, he still has 10 more chances. I mean, it's been over 3 years since he last was in victory lane. Dan, do you think he's going to win the playoffs?
Oh, was that Jimmy Johnson, you said?
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know exactly. I do remember him having a really strong run at Darlington, first race back after COVID pandemic. Will we see that again this one? I don't quite know. I mean, obviously that's going to be a night race. The other one was a day race. There's obviously differences there. So, I mean, the Roval, I think, has been a decent track for him. I'm not really too sure. I mean, he probably can. He has a lot of momentum. He's got even though he didn't make the playoffs, he's got all the momentum on his side. He's got every chance he can to try and send it off and try and get another win. And I believe he can do it, but it's just a matter of when, I think. Because I think he can do it. He just needs to be in the right position at the right time and just keep that momentum moving forward. I think probably the best shot, honestly, would probably be Darlington.
Yeah, so it's going to be cool too with the Hendrick cars all doing different tributes to him throughout the field.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It was also nice for him at Daytona because, on his retirement tour, we thought, he's going to have all these fans with him to, cheer him on and stuff. But other than the first 4 races, it's just been, the All-Star race and now Daytona that the fans have gotten to see Jimmy. But hopefully a couple of the playoff races will allow for fan attendance, and we know at the end of the season Phoenix should as well, and they'll be able to see him for one final ride in the 48. So I want to wrap up today's show with a couple of predictions heading into the playoffs. First thing, before we get to our Final Four and our champion, I want us to each give a driver that we think is going to, had a strong regular season, but is going to disappoint us in the postseason. Tim, why don't you start?
I mean, I guess I'm going to stick with what I said 2 months ago, and I'm going to say Denny Hamlin. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to ultimately get eliminated in the round of 16. I think he makes it to the final 8. But overall, I have a feeling that something bad's going to go wrong for Denny Hamlin, and he may not make the final 4. Hamlin's a very good driver. I see him winning a couple of the first chase races, especially Darlington, might I add. But overall, I think he could have a weak back half, which ultimately could cost him running for the championship.
Dan, who's someone who you think might disappoint in the playoffs?
I mean, I'm not particularly in that good position right now with, being in part of the Pro League. I don't think it's really my place to comment, but overall, I know it's going to be a pretty successful playoffs this season with a mix of youth and experience. So I'm pretty excited to see how it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to say I think there's some people who are expecting that Kyle Busch is going to turn things around here. I think he's going to win, and I think he's going to get through the round of 16. But I just think that, not having many playoff points, 2020 has just not been his year. He's been saying it time and time again. I think he's going to come back next season really strong. I just don't know about this year. So, Tim, I want you to give me your final 4 and who you think is going to end up winning the championship.
Well, can I quickly also bring up my biggest surprise, too?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah. Let's do
Because
that.
I think my biggest surprise will be Austin Dillon. I think Austin Dillon survives the round of 16. Maybe not the round of 12, but I think in terms of the chase, he'll put together a pretty good run. It seems like RCR improves every year come chase time, so I think he'll be one to watch. But overall, Final Four, again, going on my prediction, technically Denny Hamlin may not be a part of it, but it's very hard for him to not be a part of it. So I would have to say I would really give 5, I guess. If Denny doesn't falter, it'll be Denny, Kevin Harvick. I still think in terms of the other 2, I think this is a great year for Chase Elliott to come out and prove. And I'm going to have to go Joey Logano as the 4th car. But overall, if there was to be a 5th, I would also throw in there potentially Brad Keselowski. I think Keselowski will start to turn it up. But it's going to be interesting because I really think past Harvick and apologize, had a little bit of a brain lapse there, but besides Harvick and Hamlin, overall, when we look into this chase, there's a lot of things where you just can't expect because there's not a lot of bonus points out there this year. So it's going to be very clustered each round, which means you don't know who will make the next round. And one failure really this year could end your season.
Yeah, I agree because once again, we've seen that there have been strong drivers in the regular season where it just doesn't pan out in the playoffs. Just think about 2018 when everything was about the big 3 and then they all get beaten by Logano in the championship race. So my predictions are pretty similar to you. I actually agree. I think Austin Dillon, if I remember correctly, the year Brian Scott was in the Cup Series, I think that was 2016, he almost made the round of 8, Austin Dillon did, but he got in a crash with Brian Scott at Charlotte that kept him out. But I think the 3 car could find some success. I think all the Penske guys are going to be strong too. My final 4, 3 of them are the same as you. Harvick, Hamlin, Chase Elliott. I think they're all going to be there battling it out. I think the 4th one, though, I think we might actually have a Penske-free Final Four. I think they're all going to be strong, but I don't know if they're going to make it. I still have faith in Martin Truex Jr. because if you just look at his finishes, I mean, he's finishing third or fourth every race right now. And I talked about this a few shows ago. He is really good at some of these tracks that we see in the postseason. I mean, we know he's good at road courses, so that gives him the benefit at the Roval. He's finally mastered short tracks, and we have 3 of them in the playoffs. Bristol, Richmond, Martinsville are all there. And we know about his talent at mile and a halfs as well. And Kansas is there in the playoffs. So I think he's going to be able to get there. But my predicted champion, I think Kevin Harvick. I think he's going to get it done. In his 20th Cup season, he's going to get his 2nd title. Dan, any predictions?
I'm expecting it to be a pretty, I'll be honest, it's pretty exciting because, like you said, you got guys like Byron, Chase, and Bowman, the youth of the series, and Custer. Then you got the experience of Denny Hamlin, Truex, Harvick, Kyle Busch. It's a really good blend of young and old, or no, that's what it'll mean. Youth and experience. There you go. That's better. In terms of my Final Four, for me, it's probably going to be Denny, Kevin, Truex, and probably Chase, because Chase tends to be pretty clutch in those scenarios, and obviously has a pretty good record of road courses, and typically gets the job done when it needs to get done. I think for Truex, Martinsville, he's probably got to be circling that one. He already won this year and won last year. And Denny and Harvick have been pretty dumb this season. But I would definitely give Brad Keselowski a shout at making the Final Four. But that's what I'm predicting. But I don't know. I think it'll be good. And I also predict Talladega that we're not going to see a playoff driver win that race. So I think we're going to see someone, maybe a first-time winner or someone who hasn't won in quite a while, win that race.
Well, and you think about it, the Talladega races, it's been very close with non-playoff drivers, specifically Ryan Newman every single year getting beaten like in a photo finish by a Penske car there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's going to be hungry too.
I was kind of hinting at that, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. I think he could probably win it. Sorry, I was like a little lag there. But I think maybe Newman, or I think Ty's, honestly, I keep representing him, but Ty's been really good at these tracks. I think he's gotten quite a few top 10s, top 5s in their restrictor plates, and almost got a top 5 in the spring. And maybe a guy like Priest, for example. I mean, there's just a lot that can happen there. Maybe Brendan Gaughan, his final start, could get it done. So that'd be pretty exciting.
Yeah, and also don't forget too, if Ryan Blaney makes it that far, that could also be interesting as well, because he's going to go very underlooked in this playoffs for the first time compared to the past 2 seasons. So I'm excited to see what Ryan Blaney does as well, as arguably the third guy on Penske that no one really has talked about this season in terms of success.
Yeah, totally. So it's going to be fun. 10 races. It kicks off with Throwback Weekend this weekend, Labor Day weekend at Darlington Raceway. Dan Buttafuoco, thanks so much for joining us today on Sports Speak, and best of luck continuing on with the Pro League.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. Really honored to be on the show and talk about things Pro League and a little bit of real life NASCAR. And yeah, thank you. Hopefully that this success continues, and hope to have some good fortune in the future, and hope to keep this up.
All right. Well, until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Wishing you a good rest of your day here on Sports Speak.